Welcome to the Adventures in CRE Audio Series. Join Michael Belasco and Spencer Burton as they pull back the curtain on everything commercial real estate and introduce you to some of the top minds in the industry. If you want to take your skills to the next level and be part of a growing community of CRE professionals across the world, this is for you.
All right. Well, as always, we're excited to be back. Welcome back to the Adventures in the CRE Audio Series /podcast. I mean, in the midst of COVID, we are really a podcast. Let's be honest with ourselves at this point. I can't wait. In fact, Spencer, I know we talk about it all the time, but I can't wait until we get back and produce season 3, because it's going to be, it's going to be fun. Just get back together, produce a bunch of content.
Agreed.
And I can't wait. So anyway, thank you for joining us today. We're really excited. We've got Garland Fuller here with us today. Garland, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. So Garland, we're excited for the topic. We're going to talk today about growing a diverse and competent team today, because I think it's a timely topic as well as important. I mean, growing a team that is diverse and that is skilled and competent, as you say, it can make all the difference. It really can. Have you read the book Good to Great?
I have. It feels like a long time ago because I read it when it first came out.
Yeah.
And I know he did a second follow-up book as well.
Maybe I need to read.
Didn't read, but yes, I've read it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's an amazing book. It's all about, at the end of the day, the team, the members you have on that team are huge when it comes to your ultimate success. So I'm excited to get to know you, learn from you, and get your experience, and to kind of maybe frame the conversation. Spencer, I'm going to kick it over to you, and let's get going.
Sure. So let me first introduce Garland formally. We're really excited to have her on. Garland is a senior diversity recruiting business partner at CBRE. She's been now at CBRE for a little over 2 years, right, Garland? She's also the podcast host and creator of the Full Circle with Garland, a great podcast about careers, especially in real estate, and how to build and create and find diverse leaders. Prior to her time at CBRE, she was a regional recruiter for JLL, spent a little over 5 years at JLL. So what we love about having Garland on here is, first off, she speaks directly to our audience, many of which, Garland, are young real estate professionals looking to break in to the industry. Many of our listeners are college students trying to figure out that first job or coming out of business school. And so your insights at your time at JLL, now your time at CBRE, I think is really valuable. And the other piece here is we're really interested to talk about diversity, right? How do you create a team that has different people with different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, and mold all those together in a way that just creates a really competent team? So that's ultimately the idea. Let me start it off, Garland, with a question. As you're going out and you're trying to identify candidates that are unique and special and competent, how does an employer, or how does a recruiter such as yourself find those individuals?
That's a great question. I find that we look in places that we don't normally look. That's the first thing. I say, if you want to find different fish, you got to fish in different pools. When you go to the same pools, you will find the same fish. And so sometimes looking not at the schools that you use. So we know about the T1 schools, the top 25 named schools, the schools constantly being sought after. What does that mean if you don't go to a top school? I think sometimes people forget that financial economics are a huge part of why students pick the schools they pick. They may be able to get into some of these major top 10 schools, but guess what? They may not be able to afford what those schools cost. And so you can find top competent talent at public university. You can find them at state schools. You can find them at maybe, smaller private schools. Everyone isn't going to Harvard. Everyone isn't going to Princeton. Does that mean that they're not smart, they're not competent, they're not driven, ambitious? No, it just means, financially, maybe my family couldn't afford to send me there. And so I'm going to go to something that's maybe closer to home, something that is, easy. And that doesn't mean you can't find a fantastic student who is driven, who is motivated, who has those skill sets that you're looking for. It just means you're probably not going to only find them at one school. So I always encourage people to don't discount your local, college that is, maybe smaller, maybe isn't known for having a D1 football team. Doesn't mean there's not great kids there. Doesn't mean there's not great talent there. It just means we're needing to look a little bit deeper. I also do a lot specifically with student organizations. So I know career centers are great. They're there for the students. There's so many, major employers in 500 there. But if you only need to hire a small group of students, participating in on-campus recruiting may seem like a whole lot for a very little amount that you need. So how do you get in front of students? Most of the students I know participate in some kind of student organization, whether that's the real estate association or the real estate finance club or the business club. Whatever that club is, you can find somewhere between 30 to 50 students, depending on how many folks they've got in there. And once you're in that club, you essentially are talking specifically to the students that you want to see. You may have to sponsor the group in terms of, whatever their sponsorship levels are. You may have to buy foods to be the thing in the day, throw some pizza and salad or grilled food or something, because everyone shows up to the meeting when there's food. But really can find some awesome stuff that way, just going straight to the associations and to the clubs.
Yeah. So, and that's from kind of the recruiter's perspective. Let's imagine that you're the director of a real estate program or a business program that has a real estate concentration, and you're not a target school. And that's always bothered me. I'm fortunate to have gone to a target school as a grad student. My undergrad was not a target school. And it was kind of frustrating me a little bit. It's like this whole target school idea. How does a school that's not a target school still get on the radar? So what advice would you give to, say, the director of a program that's not a target school to get in front of the CBREs or the JLLs, but the Tishmans and the Hines of the world? How do those schools get in front of those employers and showcase the talent that they have that are coming out of their schools?
That's great. So I do quite a few, not only career nights and things like that, that are hosted by the school, but I mean, usually it's picking up the phone. Yeah. I think oftentimes, you go to the schools that respond to you. I mean, I'll be very honest. The smaller schools sometimes may not have the most robust programs and people to be able to follow up with all of your needs. Whereas sometimes the bigger schools, they've got a career center for every school. They've got a career in not only for the graduate school, for the undergraduate school. And so when you call, they're usually very responsive and they're happy to have you on campus. So I think with a smaller school, I mean, you need to really target the employers and already have in mind the students that you think are going to be great there, because you don't want to, target all of them and then you only have 5 students who are really strong. So out from your students, like where would they really want to go, and get them in front. I mean, I think I work within a school here, Occidental College. Not something that people will probably think. Occidental College is a small liberal arts school in Eagle Rock, but I have a relationship with that school. Why? Well, we've got a few alumni that came from that school, so they made the connection. The Career Center has been diligent about following up every year. Like, I want you to meet my students. I want you to see who we have here. They don't have a real estate program, but guess what? They have an economics program. They have students who do participate in athletics. They do have students who are very, very driven, very smart, problem solving. Every time I show up on that campus, there's some awesome students, and there's students that I hire, some that I keep in touch with and we hire later on. But that school's on my radar because they do a very good job of following up. So I always tell, schools, you need to follow up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's great advice. Not all of us have the support as students, the support of the administration. We've run into real estate students that they're the only student in their entire business school that's studying real estate. Maybe a question for Tucker, who knows this space really well. What can that individual do to get on the radar of the bigger firms? So they're not at a target school, and maybe they don't have the support of their program. What can they do to get on the radar to land a job at a great real estate company?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm gonna kind of talk with Garland about this and ask some questions. But coming back to your question, Spencer, for example, I spoke with a student at Cal Poly. They have no real estate club. They have an econ club. They have no real estate classes. He's been trying to break into the commercial real estate business. He's taken adventures in CRE. He has leveraged the podcasts. He's leveraged, the deep dives. And I think that's a perfect way to get into the business. Finding real estate education, learning about what's trending, learning about who the companies are, and like Garland said, reaching out, picking up the phone, following up. But coming back to what you said in the beginning, Garland, I want to kind of just play a scenario in front of you. So there's 5 candidates. 4 come from those kind of top schools. They have education in real estate. They maybe have an internship or 2. They're in the clubs. Their family's in real estate. And then there's that 5th from Occidental College, has none of that. How does that person stand out? Especially at a CBJLL, where they look for that kind of talent out of the 4 to 5. How does that one person stand out, I guess?
Yeah. So it's so funny. So I think that's why my job was created.
Yeah.
Because essentially I find the 5th candidate, that's the person I'm putting forth to the team, because they didn't come through our traditional channels. And so I usually am championing them in the process. I am saying, okay, you're going to be meeting, this is who you're going to be meeting with. This is what they're going to probably ask you about. There's probably going to be some kind of test. So be sure you read up on, real estate finance, learn what net present value is, know what triple net is, do know how to calculate IRR. Like I tell them, go back through that chapter. If you haven't looked at that chapter lately, I need you to go back through that chapter to understand that, because we're going to test you and you're going to have to know that, because that test result is going to tell us whether we want to move you forward. So I kind of tell them what they need to know in terms of just that technical piece, but just how to present yourself. Like you need to know how to come across as a personable individual, because this is still a business. Like make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're going to be having to, connect with not only internally a variety of stakeholders, but externally you'll be talking to a variety of people. And so I've spoken to students who don't come from the top schools, but there's just something there that's very much like they're curious, they're ambitious, they're passionate. Yeah. And there's something to be said about the student who didn't have all the resources, because they want it and they're doing the research on their own, right, and they're making it happen. I usually also tell these students, join ULI, join an organization, because once you get in with people in the industry and they find out you're new, they find out you don't, know a lot of people, you instantly start to talk, connect, network, learn who. You end up sometimes getting opportunities through that. So sometimes you have to make your own opportunity. So if you don't have a real estate club, I'll say start one. From what I understand on campus, you only need 3 people and a signature faculty member to start a club. So you can start the club. And then guess what? You put on your resume, I'm president and founder of the real estate club.
Yeah.
So
It-
don't let that stop you.
It's totally like what you're saying is gold. In fact, we've had a couple of people on the podcast. Justin Leah, is that right, Tucker? Justin Leah came on, and wasn't he the guy that had been to like 140 different? Like he went to different offices in the Dallas area. Like
That was
140
Alex Williams.
Alex Williams. That's right. Alex Williams was one of those guys. And then Spencer, we had somebody on. Was his name Matt? We've done so many. Sorry, Matt. He worked for that firm for free. During like 2009, 10 time frame. He just said, "Hey, I'm educated, but I want to provide value first." Was that Matt? Was that his name?
Yeah.
It's so long ago. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. The point is there is sitting back and waiting, right? And maybe even sharpening your skills and things like that. But the idea is sitting back and waiting for something to happen, or making a plan, being strategic, going out and doing those proactive things like starting a club, whatever makes the most sense for you where you're at. Like starting a club shows initiative. Going into a hiring manager like Alex did. Oh my gosh, Alex! By the time he got done in my interview with him, I think it was over 6 months. There's 140 visits to different hiring managers in the Dallas area, and they all the job opportunities happened within a week. And he had like 4 to 6 job offers. I could be botching that, but I know he had a bunch of job offers, and he got to choose the one he wanted.
That's right.
At CBRE.
At CBRE.
That's awesome.
That's right.
I love it. So I mean,
You know?
this summer, or should I say 2020 summer, when internships kind of dissipated into thin air and everyone was sad, and I said, you still need to get the experience.
Yep.
Who says you can't do financial models for certain areas of your city? You're still going to have to know how to do the model. You don't need to wait for an organization to say, do this model for me. If there are organizations out there who you would want to work for, exactly like you said, for free, because I mean, right now you're not working and you're not getting anything. So call somebody and say, hey, I just took this course. I want to put it into practice. I've learned some basics, but I really want to, work with a company where I get to see how this really works in real life. Can I, work with you? You don't have to pay me, but I definitely would love to get a recommendation from you after this is all said and done. So that way I can, show that I added value here. And I mean, you can do that. You can totally do that. You can also just get together with your friends that like this stuff and like do stuff together. That's what an organization is, folks.
Yep.
It's just a bunch of people who have similar interests. They like the same thing. They brainstorm, come up with ideas, and that's what they do. And so, like you said, it doesn't mean you have to wait for the internship. Don't get me wrong. Right now, they're few and far between, and they're definitely not as many as they were 3-4 years ago. So instead of fighting over one thing, go create your own thing.
Yeah. Well, and so I want to really get into the power of a diverse and competent team. Before I do that, I just have to say, hearing from you, Garland, and then hearing your role at a certain point at CBRE, what that reiterates to me is the importance of a mentor. And in a way, what you act as is a mentor to those who don't traditionally have a mentor, and they need someone to tell them, make sure you know IRR before your technical interview, right? And others who may have come from a target school or have family with this background or friends or whatnot, they already know who to turn to get that advice. But not everyone does, and especially those who haven't traditionally, dominated the real estate industry. A big key is to have someone that you can turn to, that you can ask questions, who can give you that advice, the advice that you're giving and that we're talking through here. That's so key to be able to break into the industry. Now, let me pivot to the larger question around why a diverse and competent team. Now, I think most firms now recognize the value, but for those who are building who are putting in the time and effort to build a diverse and competent team, and maybe for those who are skeptical, what is the value in your view, Garland, of having a truly diverse and competent team?
Wow. So, I'll talk about the research and then I'll talk about what I see every day. So the research shows that, if you have diverse teams, not only are they somewhere between 20 to 30% more profitable, they are also just, in terms of the ideas that they generate, what productivity looks like, is just greater. So it just makes good business sense to have diverse teams. I think when you apply this to real estate, what I'm seeing on the inside is clients show up wanting to have people who understand their products, who have used their products, who understand what their long-term goals are. And so when you have a diverse team of people who have, that same product in their, medicine cabinet, understand what you're doing, are excited about what you're doing, the passion and the interest and the ideas that get generated on your business, especially from a real estate perspective, you could just see it. And what I know is that clients are changing. So, maybe before, if it was a law firm, you show up, everyone's in suits and it works. But, if you have a fashion company and it's a woman who's running this company and she needs an industrial building in the Inland Empire, and you show up and have a woman industrial broker, you're probably going to get farther with her. You just will. Or you have to know what her interests are and be adaptable and emotionally intelligent to be able to go wherever she's going to want to go. If you show up with a, older guy, may or may not go well.
Yep.
You have to be, I say, reflecting your clients. You have to be reflecting the next generation, the future. I think this industry is worked the way it's worked because of the powers that be. The powers that be are starting to change. The globalization of this, world is starting to change. When you look at the demographics of this country, it's starting to change. And so if you're not keeping up with that, it's really turning into an adapt or die situation. Like your organization's not evolving with the times. And that includes the people that you hire, the work that you go after, because you have to see the trend before it becomes the trend, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you're behind at that point. And so if you're not aware of what they call Generation Z and millennials are into, because they're the largest next generation, let's just be honest. And so if you don't know what they're into, the businesses that have emerged because of their, buying power, like wouldn't be an Uber without that generation. And so you have to keep up with it. And the way to do that is to make sure that you've got folks who understand what's going on. And when you look at, race, ethnicity, things like that, I think gender as well, these kind of identifiers, these markers, you realize that if you're not keeping up with the trends within all groups, all communities, it's just not going to continue to thrive as it should. So
Yeah.
I don't want people to think about it in a political, it's not political. This is literally like, it's like when you go to the grocery store and there's like, I don't know, 30 different kinds of cereal, right? People go to the cereal that they like. Some like granola, some like Frosted Flakes, some like Mueslix, right? So everyone's got something there for them. This is no different than the menu of offerings that you have in your organization. If you don't have 30 different kinds of cereal and you're only working with, 2 kinds, you're totally missing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, Frosted Flakes.
Well,
Having whatever your jam is.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about.
I really think it's all about perspective. And what I mean by that is, so I was born in Montana and raised in Idaho. And really my perspective, you could draw a 250-mile radius around that little place that I went to high school. And that was my world, right? That was the bubble that I existed in. And all of a sudden I moved to Latin America. I moved to South America, actually to Venezuela. I lived in Venezuela when Chavez won his first election. Later, I lived 7 years in Panama, and all of a sudden, my perspective changed. And all of a sudden, I could draw a 1,500-mile radius around some dot somewhere that I lived, and that was now my perspective. And that's because the people that I was engaging with on a day-to-day basis, either work or professionally or personally, just thought differently than I did. And it wasn't, and my wife and I always had this saying when we were in Panama, they just do things different in other places. And we created this mantra: different isn't bad, it's just different. And in fact, when you embrace the differences, and there's a lot of them in Panama, and you're living in a country totally different from the United States, there's things that when you're used to how they're done in the States can be frustrating. But when you reverse the thinking and you go, okay, this is just a different way of thinking, and then you embrace that and you incorporate it into your own, whether it's your own team, now I'm coming back to the business world, your own personal life, it makes for a more enriching and full life. And so when I think about a team, rather than a 100-mile radius around one way of thinking, why not do 1,500? And by the way, I wish I had a more global, but I don't have the time to move to everywhere in the world, and my kids probably wouldn't let me. But this idea is, as you expand your perspective by bringing other members of the team who maybe have their own radius, and all of a sudden you kind of create this really diverse, cool way of thinking. And you might argue because you have two different perspectives, and this is the right way, I think, to do it. And someone else says, no, what are you talking about? This is the right way to do it. But when you bring those two together, and as long as there is a equal sharing of opinions and appreciation for opinions, it creates a really rich tapestry of ideas that could then push businesses forward. And so now back to Garland, your point about 20 to 30% more profitable, I can see how that would translate to that. And so anyway, a little bit of a soapbox, but a personal experience and my appreciation for broadening the perspective by bringing other people who think differently than you may think, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of a kaleidoscope, which you were saying, right? So you've got different colored pieces all through. And so if you turn it around, you get this really cool visual.
Yes.
But if you only had, one lens, you just don't get it. It's not as cool. It's not as much to see. And so, yeah, it definitely is perspective taking. It's also, like you're saying, different upbringings, different backgrounds, people seeing things differently. And so when everyone puts that together, you come up with a new way forward. So there's not just one way. It's, oh, well, I never thought about doing it this way. And when you collaborate to figure that out, it does usually come up with something totally different. And that's usually what wins, I tell you, but that's why it works. Because something else is like, oh, this is cool. This is different.
Yeah. And it's funny because and after kind of hearing what Spencer was talking about, Spencer, I think about what we're working on right now with Tavares, right? He's, from another country. His English is limited, but man, he is a phenom at coding. He's a developer. He's a developer we work with. And while we have not the most perfect communication as far as language is concerned, man, somehow he can pull out of our heads what we're saying, and he can build some of these cool things. So the dynamics that you can adopt or really inherit, like bring into a team, the dynamics that are possible by focusing on diversity of a lot of things, skill sets, and just diversity in general. You're not going to get that again if you are myopic and you're like, you got the blinders on. You're only doing business with the guys that or gals that were in your club. You're going to lose out on potential talent, potential opportunity, potential new ways of thinking, which, by the way, that's probably the biggest one. The new way of thinking. If I could look at anything over the last 2 years within our podcast, our content, our adventures in CRE, the one like common thread through everything is we're always thinking, what's the move in front of us? Like, how can we set the foundation now to be at that move in the future, right? And it comes from, we have a team of about 5 or 6 or 7, something like that. And when we do these meetings, everybody's bringing their input. We have different ages, different ethnicities, different languages, and they're all bringing these ideas because we don't have a monopoly on ideas. All right. And the second we think we do is when we fall back and we become part of the crowd instead of leading the crowd. You know what I mean? And so I think just those dynamics and the ability for somebody to throw a concept out there that might not be the concept, but it might pair up with another concept that ends up being the idea, right? And I think just what you lose by staying myopic, by staying, controlled in this small environment is opportunity. I think you pretty much are just, locking yourself out of potential future opportunity by confining yourself to something that may be comfortable, but is not what is optimal in today's work environment and business environment for that matter. So very well said.
No, I think you're right. And Garland, we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that you have the last word here. What I'm hearing is team leaders must be deliberate about pushing for diversity, and it's not easy, but it's necessary for the growth and survival in a lot of ways of the teams. Last word to you, Garland, on this topic before we wrap up.
Yeah. So I tell people it's not always about culture fit. It's sometimes about culture add. So instead of trying to find someone that, would fit in perfectly with your team, meaning they are similar, what is it that this person would bring that you don't already have on your team? Because if you're looking for someone who is going to group think with the rest of you, it's going to be more the same. If you're looking for someone who, and know it in the interview that they're different, because it might even, brush up against your biases, as I say, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have biases, and we didn't get even to that conversation. That could be a second follow-up, is let's talk about our biases.
Yeah.
Our biases are there, and then somebody rubs it, and you're like, I don't know, they're not like us. That should be your first kind of inkling of that might be something I look at more by myself, and then look at this person and think, what is it about them that's different, that's making me even feel this way? And what is it that they could bring to my team? I always encourage people to, with this diversity, like you were saying, Spencer, it will be a little rough at first. It will be a little grapple at first. There will be a little friction. Lean into the friction. Don't be afraid. It's not the end of the world. You will learn something from this. The individual that you're working with will learn something as well. I think moving forward in a space of how can we learn from each other, that is really where we're going to be. And then from there, you get these awesome opportunities, exactly what Sam says, because if someone sees something and says, oh yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, we should go for it for these reasons, here's why I think we're great, and this wasn't even on your radar, you didn't know anything about it, but this person is making a very compelling argument for why this is business we should be going after and why we can win it, go with it and see where it goes. Because here's what I know, oftentimes it's the stuff that is below the surface, the stuff that everyone's kind of, like you said, the next, not what everyone's doing, but what's the next thing. The next thing isn't easy to see. The next thing is usually right below. And if you can't spot it, find people who can spot it for you. And chances are those are going to be people who don't have the same perspective that you have. And so it just behooves your team. It behooves everybody who you work with, just come with that different of perspective. But for me, it is, I think I live a diverse life. And so it comes naturally to me. It excites me. I really love it. But I know if that's not been your experience, at first it might feel a little awkward. Don't let that be what stops you. Let that be what fuels you and drives you to kind of grow. So this is a lot of growing. This is a year of growth, I'm hoping, for a lot of you. Yeah. So just, lean into it.
Love it. Garland, very well said. Thank you for being here. You've been an amazing guest. Can't say enough good things about you because this was so much fun. So we'll have to have you back to talk about, more topics and things along those lines. And if you're listening, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Adventures in CRE Audio Series. For show notes and additional resources, head over to www.adventuresincre.com/audio series. Would you like to learn real estate financial modeling in a matter of weeks and do it with zero guesswork? If so, the A.CRE Accelerator is for you. The Accelerator is a step-by-step, case-based program designed to teach you exactly what you need to know and in the order you need to know it, so you can gain both the knowledge and experience to take your career to the next level. To see if the Accelerator is right for you, go to www.adventuresincre.com/accelerator.